Hello again, everyone. I'm Eric Lorber. I'm the director of Rain Taxi, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our 20th Twin Cities Book Festival. We're on the third day of this virtual festival, and there are a lot of great aspects online here with us to explore. We have 19 of these live author events. If you miss any, you can catch the replay, of course. And as you can see, we're joined again for this event by AJ, our ASL interpreter. We're really pleased to provide interpretation for several of the events throughout the festival. We want to thank the University of Minnesota Libraries for their support with that. We also have a handful of pre-recorded events to offer in our Minnesota Writers Mashup and in Rain Taxi's new chapbook launch featuring Black writers of the Twin Cities. As well, we have an exciting exhibit hall filled with publishers, organizations, and authors who all want to share with you their latest releases, and there are some great ones in there if you poke around. For this session, I'm thrilled to introduce one of my favorite authors from across the pond. Jasper Fforde is beaming to us today from Wales in the United Kingdom. He burst into the scene here about 2 decades ago, I want to say, with The Air Affair, and since then has written 12 novels, each one as amazing as the last. His brand new book is called The Constant Rabbit, and The Guardian describes it as a political satire cloaked in Fforde's trademark bizarre whimsy. To speak with Jasper Fforde today is our old friend Stephanie Curtis. Stephanie is the director of programming at Minnesota Public Radio. Listeners there will recognize her voice from her always circumspect movie reviews. And of course, she's a dedicated reader and has been with us at the festival many times leading author conversations. So I'm delighted that she can do this one. I want to remind all our viewers that you can ask questions. There's a great little button at the bottom of your screen to do that, and Stephanie would love to pepper some of those in. You can buy books by Jasper Fforde with an easy link down there as well. And you can donate if you choose. We are a nonprofit organization, and while we bring you this festival entirely free of charge, we would love your help in starting some seed money to get working on 2021. For now, please enjoy this event. Welcome, Jasper, and take it away, Stephanie.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm thrilled to have everybody here. And really want to tell you, put the questions and the ask a question. I will go to them and we'll make sure that you get to ask Jasper what you want to hear. But first, I wanted, for people who haven't read The Constant Rabbit yet, which it's a delightful satire, and it is based on the idea that there is an anthropomorphizing event 55 years ago. Can you tell us a little bit more about that so people know about the world we're talking about?
Yeah, okay. Hello, everybody. So the conceit of this book is that in about 1967, I think it was, 18 rabbits underwent an anomalous anthropomorphizing event, and overnight became 6 foot tall, could walk, talk, they had reason, they could understand their place within society and everything else, and they were very sort of human-like. And this initially, everybody was like, wow, this is so amazing. It's a cause of celebration, fantastic. Let's talk to the rabbits, understand what they're at. But then as the numbers grow, that sort of changes to suspicion and fear and eventually hatred. And the rabbits now number about 1.2 million. They're living in the UK, and the British government want to rehome them in Wales in a huge mega warren, something the rabbits don't much like the sound of. And the story really is about our protagonist, Peter Knox, who works for the Rabbit Compliance Task Force, which, as you might imagine, is not that friendly towards rabbits. He lives in a little village in the middle of England, and a family of rabbits move in next door. The village want them to go, and this is slightly complicated because Mrs. Rabbit, Connie, he and he and Connie had a sort of bit of a little kind of, you know, thing at uni together, so it's a bit awkward, and that's kind of where the story starts, basically.
Why did you choose rabbits?
Choosing rabbits, it's actually, I mean, the great thing about allegorical stories, especially when you're using animals, is that they bring, when you anthropomorphize an animal, you bring with it some of obviously its attributes, and then you mix that in with humans, and it makes them, I think, you know, very, very relatable. But the thing about rabbits is that we have a very, very confused relationship with many of the animals that we share this planet with. Not, you know, obviously not to mention a very confused relationship with each other at the same time. And rabbits, on the one hand, we use words to describe them, like cute and fluffy and, you know, adorable. And we have them as pets, you know, and people breed them, and, you know, and you would not think to hurt one. Yet on the other side of the coin, we use different words to describe them, like vermin and a pest and a plague, and we will attempt to annihilate them literally in their hundreds of millions. So rabbits, for me, I think were actually the perfect choice. And I wouldn't have worked with like sloths or alligators or a bee. It just wouldn't work. And of course we use rabbits all the time in advertising. This confusion, you know, goes even to, we have, you know, and cute, you know, Thumper appears, and there's Roger Rabbit and the Duracell bunny and all that kind of stuff, you know, and bunny girls, for instance. I mean, it's bizarre. So I thought it was actually a really good way to sort of maybe highlight that very confused relationship we have with some of our animal friends.
I think we're quite familiar in the US with Jessica Rabbit, which has caused confusion for many people over the decades.
Well, she's not a rabbit, though, is she?
Yeah, that's right. She's not a rabbit.
She's not a rabbit. She's only called Jessica Rabbit because that's her surname.
She's married,
she married Roger.
That's
you know,
right.
And I suppose there's a nod there in my book, is that they're all the rabbits, pretty much. There's a few who don't, but they all have the surname Rabbit. They all share the same surname, like
but
Roger.
Then in the UK, you had the Cadbury Rabbit, which is which people should just Google it afterwards. Google it if you don't know who the Cadbury Rabbit is. But what was when you first started out and built this world? What was your goal to begin with? Was it, yeah. What was the goal?
The goal?
Because it's become so many things. It is, it's about, my son is in here. Get out of here and put that phone, bring me my phone back and shut it down. You cannot use my stuff. I'm so sorry, everybody.
That's all right.
I turned off all my Wi-Fi and everything, but I didn't turn off my children. He will just have to wait. So the book, it could be like in the US, you could read it as an allegory about the fears of the wall and immigration, and in the UK, immigration and Syrian refugees and Brexit. And it just had so many parts and kept morphing for me in my mind. And I was wondering what your original goal was with it.
I think I was writing a book called Early Riser and having a terrible time with it. It was an awful book to write. It took like 4 years, and it should never have taken that long. And I took a little break because I had this idea about anthropomorphized rabbits as a kind of demonized minority other. And I wrote like 20,000 words of it, and it all seemed to work on a sort of multi-level, that I could have fun with it, because essentially, you know, I see myself as an entertainer. You know, that's people give me their hard-earned cash, and in return I have to entertain for 100,000 words. So it has to be, I have to write a book, I think, that's funny. I like writing funny books. I think it's important, but they can also be serious. You can, you know, tragic comedy is something that's been with us a long time. And I think as I started writing it, originally it was basically rabbits moving in next door, and the village going, oh well, you know, they breed, you know, and they burrow, and making up all these kind of ridiculous excuses to try and get rid of them, and how they were going to get rid of the rabbits. But as I wrote it, I suddenly realized that there's a broader world here that I can play with, and where am I going to end up? And I was actually quite pleased with where it ended up, actually, because at the time we were going through Brexit here in the UK. Brexit had just happened, and it was also a time for me when I was really kind of questioning, that sense of British exceptionalism that I've been brought up with, because I was born in 1961. That's like 15, 16 years after the war had ended, and Britain at that time was still very much a we won the war sort of place. I think, in parts it still is, and I think it was me sort of realizing that perhaps, we weren't quite the wonderful guys that we thought we were, and Brexit for me typified that, because no matter how people tried to package Brexit, all I could think of was racism and xenophobia, and this idea that we're big and proud and clever enough and special enough to be able to go on our own, and we don't need anyone else, and we don't need Europe, and we're better than. And I just hated that. I really did. The whole Brexit thing just makes me absolutely boil within a rage, in a sort of English kind of way, which is like this. Did you see that? Did you see that? Me boiling within a rage? I'll do it again. Okay, you waiting?
It's a lot like Minnesotan boiling in a rage.
There you go. And that's really was. When people were saying to me, Jasper, what are you writing? And I was saying, well, it's my Brexit anger book. And they go, God. And I said, no, don't worry. It's really silly and fun, and there are rabbits in it. And what's not to like about anthropomorphized rabbits? But I think that was where the aim was. It was just me just getting a bit pissed off. And I think with myself as well, because you ask questions of yourself and your nation, and I was coming up short on both counts. And I think there's a lot of that in the book as well. There's autobiographical, I think, as well, about coming to realizations about oneself and one's nation. Not autobiographical in that I ever had a girlfriend who was a rabbit. I do want to make quite sort of sure of that.
Melanie has a question that's really interesting. She said, "This is the first of your books that I had to force myself to finish. It was so socially uncomfortable. Knowing that this shows my privilege in life, did you feel like this book would elicit that feeling in your readers much more than your other novels?" And I think that's what you're talking about. Peter is as you've said before, he's the main character. Peter Knox is not a rabbit. He is a human who works for a agency that helps corral the rabbits and keep them under control, compliance. And he's not a heroic figure, really. And
no,
you didn't. I mean, Melanie, she was uncomfortable. Did you want people to feel uncomfortable?
I think yeah. I mean, I think uncomfortable is probably quite a good emotion to have. I think shame and uncomfortable are quite, you have to sort of be quite specific over how those emotions, you use those emotions. I think so. Peter Knox, the protagonist, he's complicit and he doesn't know it. And he's a nice guy, he really is, and he thinks he's a nice guy, and he says, well, I work for the Rabbit Compliance Task Force, but if I didn't do it, someone else would, and I've got my mortgage to pay, and the pension is really, really good, and I think he's been lying to himself for decades, the whole time he's been doing this job, and that actually he's suddenly realizing that he's perhaps not one of the good guys. And I think if I mean, I don't know, do I want people to feel uncomfortable? I want people to be questioning. I mean, that's perhaps where I want to be with this, is that you should question all these things, because there's a lot in the book. There's a lot of little details as well. There's one particular instance which I kind of do as a comedy sort of riff, where the rabbits explain the laws which are against burrowing. And there are huge amounts of laws against burrowing. Now, obviously, in this world, those laws would be, everybody would be subject to the laws about burrowing. But really, it's only a law to disenfranchise rabbits. And a lot of this stuff, is kind of out there, and it's happening, and it's right in our faces. And because it's been there for so long, we kind of don't see it. But I don't want it to be this like heavy book which makes people feel uncomfortable. I want people to read it and perhaps go, Yeah. Mm. And talk and think and go, where am I in all this? What am I doing? And I think this is, I don't want to give any spoiler alerts as the end. And I think this is Peter's problem in the book, in the protagonist. He's understanding this stuff, but it's like, what do I do? Where do I go? What it's just confusing. So yeah, tricky one. But it's not all. I don't want to, put people off by saying it's all heaviosity and, really big social commentary. There's a lot of, very silly sort of stuff in there as well. Which
There's so
love,
I want to
love
assure everybody there's a lot of silly stuff, and it's
a lot of
awesome.
silly stuff
A
because
lot of silly
it's a
stuff.
comedy, it's a
Mhm.
farce. It's also a kind of, I think it's kind of nice little love story, really. Even though it's sort of, well, spoiler alert, unrequited, I suppose. But there's this huge affection between the two of them, and that I really enjoy writing. I really enjoy writing. Yeah. Anyway.
One of the it reminded me at points of the movie Get Out, where the Jordan Peele horror movie, where I'm going to give away the plot of that, but where these people who are lefty seeming and kind of really idolize Black culture, who also hate Black people and want to just take them over. And there's a little bit of that you've got where humans are disgusted by rabbits, and yet they're drawn to them and they find them alluring, and they're very interested in them, and they can't look away. And I was wondering how you went about making the character of Constance, who she's not the protagonist, that's Peter, but she is a heroic character and funny and bawdy and just she's completely alluring. Like I found myself wanting there to be a TV show, but how would you bring her to life, or how would you do that? Because she's so full of life. She's such an amazing character. How did you go about creating Constance?
I don't know. I mean, it's interesting with characters. I mean, character development is that you want them to be something, and you want them to be all things. You want them to be, you want them to be that sort of maybe amalgam of many people that you've met, or many people that you've seen or heard talking, or something like that. But I think the really fun thing about writing the rabbits is, someone said to me the other day, is that be science fiction, cutting aliens, and aliens are hard to write because they're not us. And the great thing I could do with Connie is that she's not human, right? She's not wired like we are, and she can be immensely passionate yet incredibly aggressive and funny, really, all within the space of about 10 minutes. And I think there was the actual release of saying that she's not human. And because if she was human, it would be kind of I think a bit of a hard play. But the fact she's not human kind of makes sense to it. And a lot of when you're writing science fiction or science fantasy, a lot of it is the world, and that logical world in which Constance lives. And once that's sort of in place, so it's actually almost as important to create the world as it is the characters, because in that world, Constance actually shines brighter, on that backdrop. If we just brought her into our world, she'd just be maybe unusual, but there she becomes across as like unique. But the rabbits were great fun to write because they're just such terrific people. I mean, they're just better in every single way. They're just lovely, and it was just nice to do that, but also give her these attributes which were polar opposites. She could do these things. I can't really say too much about spoilers. She can do these things, but then be this other thing as well. And there's a sense of forgiveness about her that I kind of like, an acceptance of Peter's failings, an acceptance and a forgiveness. But she knows what humans are like. Rabbits know all too well what humans are like. So I don't know. She was just great fun to develop, and the more I wrote about her, the more I liked her. I was originally her name was Constance because I had this sort of subplot, which was a sort of Lady Chatterley's lover subplot, where I think I sort of thought, you know, Peter was going to be like Mellors, and her husband is called Clifford, and he still is in the book. But that's the only thing that relates to Lady Chatterley. But that's what she became, you know, Constance, and I just love the name Constance, Connie. And the Constant Rabbit, it all sort of fitted together very, very well. But I do like her. I think she's a lovely character, really.
It's such an intricate book. I mean, it's a breeze. It just flies by. But the footnotes and the references to religion and politics and social standing. I mean, it's dizzying. Did it come together easily, or is this something that you edited and re-edited and got input on?
Yeah, I mean, this is to people who've read, you know, my other books, you will say, yeah, well, it's definitely a Jasper book, because I always put tons in. I kind of put a lot in, put a lot of the world in, and then I take just enough out so the world is apparent to you without you being told about it all the time. And I think that's important to do, because it's the world that you create yourself with my cues in the book is, I think, a more vivid world, because I think readers, you know, it's an imaginative a process as writing, because you're taking these cues and then you're making this stuff in your head, and that's, you know, amazing. But the less cues I do, the more kind of you have to do, I feel, but that makes it more real and you engage more, I think, in the book as a whole. So I just put all this stuff in, and of course I'm always very, very keen on the logic of the world and how the world fits together, and the world has to have a consistent logic that makes it all work. That how are the rabbits, why are the rabbits, you know, they drive cars, they do this, they do that, why do they drive American cars, you know, and it becomes very consistent. And the same with Early Rise or even Shades of Grey. They're very dense, consistent worlds, and I really enjoy that. There's a great sort of pleasure in a kind of almost sort of elegant engineering way, that I like things fitting together in a nice, logical way. And if I ask myself, you know, well, how would they do this? And I have to try and figure out why somebody would do something. And if the motivation doesn't work within that world, I either throw it out or I modify the world so I can use that that motivation. And it's just a very complex, weird, me in a room with a laptop, just endlessly pounding the keyboards, going, this will work, this won't, let's play with this, let's do that. Write it over long, you know, edit it shorter, make it dense, take out and everything you don't need, you know, just get rid of everything that isn't necessary to be there. And then eventually this little thing bubbles to the surface, and there it is.
Yeah, the imagination of like what technology rabbits would use and how devoted would rabbits be to reusing, and the rules of their world is just beautiful.
Yeah.
Is it hard to, I mean, you've written serial books before. Once you build these rules and this world, is it something you want to then explore longer after you've come up with so much? And I mean, there's religion in there, there's like deep, you know, like there's a ton there. Is it hard to decide to make it a standalone and not have it be a series? Do you want to go back and explore it more?
Well, all my
I don't want to give away too much.
No. All my books begin as standalones, right? So The Air Affair was a standalone. I mean, it really was. And, you know, you read it and you go, yeah, okay, we're pretty much done there. Yeah. There's no book world. That's not mentioned in it. That's something that I bring in with book 2. But my publishers at the time said, you know, could you do a sequel? And I said yes, because this was my first book deal, and I wasn't going to say no. And then, you know, all of a sudden, I sort of chanced across this idea of the book world and being able to travel inside books, and I go, okay, well that's got legs. That's got serious legs. Same with the nursery crime series, you know, police procedurals with nursery rhyme characters. I think it's got legs. It's an idea that's got legs. So they all begin. The Big Over Easy was originally a standalone, and then I wrote the sequel. The Last Dragon Slayer was a standalone, and then I wrote a series on that. Shades of Grey was a standalone that I couldn't finish. Finishing books is hard, really hard. So I rather rashly said, to be continued as a later date, and I've been being held to that ever since. So I start off with standalones, and then the world ends up being quite fun and exciting and new and unusual. I'm not sure I'm going to write a sequel to Constant Rabbit, though. I think it's kind of done, really, in that kind of world. There would be more, but it would be a kind of bandwagony thing, and I just want to. It can sit on its own, I think. So I don't think we'll come back to Constance again, and Peter. I think we're probably done there. But
Nick asked a question in the Ask a Question box at the bottom. He wants to know if we can have access to the 200,000 word unedited first draft of your books.
Oh, you wouldn't want to read it. Oh no. Okay, so on my website, I do special features, right? And there's deleted scenes, and you can go through and look at deleted scenes. And when you see them, it's like deleted scenes on a DVD of a movie. When you see them, you go, oh, yeah, I can see why they didn't put it in, because it's just a bit boring, really. What were they doing? And it's the same with some of the chapters. I mean, the Early Riser was, I think, over 240,000 words or something ridiculous. Certainly over 200, and it's now down to 130. And, there's almost a novel being thrown out there, but I would never want anyone to read that. You would just be looking at it and going, what this just is awful. So there's a very good reason we edit and we throw out all those words. It's just part of the process. I mean, it's like viewing a painting, with all the underpainting in as well. It just would be a mess, I think. So no is the answer. No, they just get left on my hard drive.
Jen she says, most of your books have some sort of reference to Jane Eyre, Jane and Eddie, and Shades of Grey, entire plot of Eyre Affair. Was there a nod in The Constant Rabbit? And if not, why not?
Yeah, I think we got a quite early on. There's a reference to it's one of those little details that I like, is that when rabbits have a different language. They speak English very well. They speak about 7 languages each, because it's easy for a rabbit, because they're pretty smart. But they do have a word. They do have their own language, which is called rabbity, and it's humans have never been able to figure it out. It's way too complex for that. But when the first chapter is all about speed librarying, so Peter Knox runs a speed librarying team, because the libraries can only stay open for 6 minutes every 2 weeks. So they have to go in and do all this speed librarying, and that's where Connie turns up for the first time, and she's looking for a book retold for rabbits, which were done a long time ago, and she's after Rabbit and Rabbitability by Jane Austen, which is very like Austen's classics, only with more carrots, burrows, sex, more carrots and burrows, and I kind of like that idea. That when the rabbits arrived, I went, great. Why don't you save us some of our classics, but retold for rabbits? So I do bring in the classics, and I think there's also a nice little reference to Shakespeare, which I always like to do as well. Is that I think is it As You Like It? They describe the rabbits, say, well, As You Like It, it's quite good. But in our version, there are six sets of identical octuplets, which is much funnier, and Shakespeare really missed a trick on that one. So I like to kind of drag in Shakespeare, because it's like a standard. I always think a standard candle, and it's when you're writing kind of books which take place in a world that is ours but is not ours, and it's a version of ours that kind of sort of couldn't be, but it would be quite fun if it was. But there are some things that I like to bring in as I call them standard candles, and it's how do the people in this world regard Shakespeare, and and that's how rabbits look at Shakespeare. And then in the Thursday Next books, people go to Richard III audience participation plays, which is how they see it. And I think there's several references to Shakespeare in Early Riser, which is a book set in a world in which humans have always hibernated, which looks at how a Shakespeare play like Romeo and Juliet would have been if Shakespeare had hibernated. So it's quite interesting to come back, and it's a good question, and it's quite interesting to come back to these stand candles and say, right, these are, you know, benchmarks, and how would they be different in this world, and that's a good way of demonstrating how the world is different.
When you started this, I was thinking about Animal Farm, obviously, for obvious reasons, and him taking on communism and different political structures with the animals. And I was wondering if you had any hesitation about having animals represent what, you know, represent other humans. Like the rabbits are representing immigrants, the rabbits are representing, and whether you were worried about kind of Twitter cancel culture coming after you for taking on such a big, emotional, important, and fraught topic. And maybe it doesn't feel that way in the UK, and it's only in the US that we have a hard time talking about these things.
Yeah, I mean, I can obviously only speak for the UK. I suppose there is a worry that, you know, someone is going to say something, you know, to me or about me. But, you know, I mean, boo-hoo. I mean, look at me, you know, super Mr. Privileged. You know, I mean, if you were to, you know, if you were to play sort of, you know, white privilege top trumps, I'd beat you on everything. I mean, I don't have Oxbridge or a title, but, you know, the whole everything else, you know, and it's like, you know, how could I be upset someone taking me to task when people who actually I mean, put it this way, I've never been discriminated against, not once, never in my entire life, you know, and this is not something that I share with millions of fellow British people. Right now, there's clearly a very good reason for this. And it just strikes me that, yeah, so, I mean, if, you know, cancel culture, well, if I get cancelled, then that, you know, me being cancelled cannot be anywhere near what it's like to actually have to deal with this shit we're having to deal with this stuff on a daily basis. Or even, you know, if you're someone who doesn't have a position, you know, trying to deal with this stuff, you know, so yeah, that's my sort of take on it, really. It's like, yeah, well, boo-hoo, you know, how sad would that be for me? I'll just go back to my house and my life and everything else, and everything will be fine. So no, it's not a big deal. But as it turned out, no one seems so far have, you know, said, you know, Jasper, you're awful for doing this. But I don't know. But it's something I feel quite strongly about, as I was going back and talking about Brexit. But yeah, so no, not too worried.
How's the pandemic been treating you?
Not too bad. I mean, we live right in the middle of Wales, you know, and we live in a place. It's like Wyoming, really. That's the sort of nearest equivalent to where I live in Wales. There's very few people around here, so we're kind of naturally social distanced. So for us, we've had very little impact, although we did obviously go through the lockdown with everyone else. And my mother came to live with us for 3 months, so that was had some challenges. But you know, other people have had it far worse. So for us, it was, you know, no, it was fine. It really was.
I want to get this right because she asked a question. Kathy says, please speak about satire in your view and its antecedents in literature in recent centuries. Wow, I guess beyond Animal Farm. So that's kind of big,
that's like a PhD thesis, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I've always learned to write from a sort of a position of, I don't know, inspired ignorance. You know, I had no training to be a writer at all. So, you know, the writing that I do is kind of me just mucking around with ideas and stuff and learning it as I went along. I didn't go to university, nothing like that. I left school at 18. And I just started writing one day when I was 27, and then 13 years later, I had a novel. But most of it was I didn't go to courses. I didn't, you know, do anything like that. I just sat down and started writing, and obviously, I've been around story my entire life. I've always loved books, but I'm not a scholarly writer in any stretch of the imagination. But I kind of understand satire, its power and allegory, I suppose, is really what we're talking here with Constant Rabbit, is that you can actually get a lot of very interesting ideas across using allegory. It's kind of almost skating under the radar, and some of it can be actually quite quite strong as well. But you can kind of get away with it. It's a weird kind of one. And I was chatting to a friend of mine, and I was trying to explain what I was doing, and they were saying, "Oh yeah, mixing comedy and satire, for a sort of for a purpose is it's good, and everyone's people who've done it for a long time." And I said, "Yeah, but mainstream, give me something in mainstream." And they went, "Well, MASH. What about MASH?" And I'm going, "Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, because this ran for 10 years, and it's a great comedy. It's a workplace comedy, essentially. But as everyone's laughing, and it's all tremendous fun. But then all of a sudden, incoming Wounded, and we're into the theatre, and it's very, very serious, and people are dying, and this is anti-war clearly. And when MASH was first made, the movie came out. It's set in Korea, but the Vietnam War was actually just still on at that time. And this was obviously a big statement, and not so much an allegory, but certainly satirical. And satire allows you obviously to poke fun at those in power, punching up rather than punching down, as we say. But a lot of this stuff, going back to your question, is there is a rich tradition of satire that goes back, a long time to kind of Greek, Greek theatre, and everyone does satire, and it's a great way of poking fun at those in power. Does it change anything? Don't know. But it certainly feels good to do it, and it feels good to read it, because you're not alone with all this stuff that's going on, and then you watch someone on YouTube or something mouthing the words of a politician in her own way, and it's very, very funny, and that you're sort of not alone. So it has its purpose, and it allows you to vent as well, doesn't it? Satire. But yeah, to give you a sort of scholarly appraisal of it, I wouldn't be able to start, I'm afraid.
You did pretty well, I think. You did well. Yeah. Okay. Kathy Balzac, she says she wants to know, what are you working on now? I hope a nursery crime.
Right. Okay. So what I'm doing at the moment is I'm doing sequels for the next 3 years. So I'm quite close to finishing a very, very rough first draft of Dragon Slayer 4. This will close off the first of 3 series. And it's actually finishing a book is great fun, and if you finish a book well, it's a very, very satisfying thing to do. With Shades of Grey, clearly it wasn't, and I had to leave it a bit open-ended. But if you can sort of close off a book, it's actually very satisfying. But I'm finding now, as I'm finishing the 4th and last Dragon Slayer book, that actually closing off a series does actually have a sort of appeal to it as well. It's actually quite exciting and actually rather nice. Just sewing up all those little threads and sort of dealing with it in a kind of nice little way and going, right, that's it, walk away, it's all done. So anyway, so I'm doing Dragon Slayer 4 at the moment. Hopefully we can get that coming out next year. And after that, I'll be doing the sequel to Shades of Grey. So that's 2021's book. And then after that, I will do TN8, which will be the last in the Thursday Next series, just to round out that one, because seven in the series isn't right. It's just the wrong number. 8 is a good number. Yeah, and come back to her. She's got a bit older, I think, and she's running a little bookshop somewhere, and is called out of retirement to get back into the book world and sort everything out. So that'd be quite fun, and I'll be doing that hopefully in 2022. The nursery crime, I was never kind of thinking I would do a sequel to that. I could do if people were desperately, buying it in their trillions. At the moment, they aren't. I don't know. If I get bored, I may decide to. I have some ideas for it. It was going to be called The Last Great Tortoise Race, and it was all around Aesop's fables. But at the moment, that's not what I'm doing. No, and that's my plans for the next 3 years.
Let's your life is mapped out. I'm impressed.
It is.
Grant
Yeah.
asks, what caused Early Riser to be a struggle to write or finish?
Oh God, it was. Oh, it was. It was. Yeah, it was really difficult.
Oh,
And I think, oh look, you've
look,
got a rabbit.
I
Who's
do.
that? Who's that?
This is
What's
Snow. He's our rabbit. He's a
Snow?
very good rabbit.
Yeah,
He's very
very
snuggly.
nice rabbit.
Yeah, making a surprise appearance.
Yeah, in a kind of, and is that a sort of fancy dressed orca outfit that
Yeah,
she's wearing?
yeah, we don't know why he's called Snow when he's black and white. We came with that name.
No,
We
it should be
adopted him
called
last
Orca.
year, and
Yeah.
we should call him Orca.
Yeah,
He's
definitely,
a very snuggly dude. But
yeah.
I thought it'd be a special surprise at the end.
Yeah,
So
very
you
nice,
know my
very nice.
allegiance to rabbits. But
Good.
Early Riser.
Good. Early Riser. Yeah, Early Riser. So I used to regard, writer's block as, I did 10 books in 10 years, and it was like bang, 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 and it was hard work. And I did maybe it was 11 years, I think, or maybe I missed a year or something. Anyway, and then Early Riser came along, and I thought, well, I'll just finish this in a year, and that won't be any problem. And for all kinds of reasons, it's like your planet's getting out of orbit, everything has to be in orbit. Everything has to be in its correct orbit. And if it's not in its correct orbit, then everything falls apart. It all just collapses like a pack of cards. Everything has to be just right. They have to be aligned. Maybe the planets have to be aligned to be able to write a novel in a year. And if they're not, then it's not going to work. And then I just sort of got into this downward spiral of, I can't write this book, and I hate this book, and it was overlong, and it didn't go in the right places, and it was crass, and I didn't like the characters, and it just went down and down, and this went on, and like over 2-3 years, and I just carried on because I couldn't give up. This is one of my things.
Sunk costs.
Yeah, we talk about like the narrative dare, which I've set myself, and you can't let yourself off the hook when it comes to a dare, and I just had to push through and get it done, and eventually, after writing and writing and writing and rewriting and rewriting, I suddenly found that I liked the characters, and this sort of story started emerging out of the murk, and I have a very odd relationship with that book. It's kind of, I never really want to go back and reread it. I just want to kind of forget about it. It's out there, and I'm quite pleased with how it turns out. And I like Charlie. I like Fodder. I like a lot of the characters in it. But it was a hard one, and I don't really know what went wrong. But everything went right in the end, and I managed to write it, and now I'm back on track.
Well, I hope you stay on track for the next couple of years. It sounds like you've got everything planned out, and I look forward to it. Thank you to everybody who's joined us. If you haven't read The Constant Rabbit, you got to read it. It is so much fun. A wonderful thing to read during this winter that we'll all get through it together in Minnesota. Anyway, thank you, Jasper, for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you to everyone at Rain Taxi, and make sure you check out the schedule because there's more events coming up, and the festival continues. And buy the book. Go and click and buy the book. Good. Take care, everybody.
Good. Thank you. And thanks,
Bye.
AJ. Great job.
Yes, thank you, AJ. Good job.
Thank you. All right.